I'm hoping we can all still be friends. I'm glad that you'll be looking out for Bonnie. I don't want anything bad to happen to her. It's just that she hurt me too bad and I can't be with her anymore. You don't think this is temporary, then? He asked. No, sir. And when you speak to her, please remind her that going along with the divorce is in her best interest. I'm looking for a quick, simple divorce. I'll file under irreconcilable differences to avoid embarrassment on both sides. I'll pay as much child support for my girls as is necessary and will also provide anything else they need. I will not, however, pay child support for Bonnie's child or any alimony. I refuse to pay her for breaking my heart and ruining our family. Let her lover take care of her. You could also remind her that as angry as I am, if it comes down to it, she's already admitted to going out and getting pregnant on purpose and trying to stick me with another man's child. That's fraud. She could be prosecuted for that. It might even be enough to get me custody of my girls and earn her a stretch in jail. I'd still get the divorce, but I'd get much better terms. I'm trying to be nice about this for the sake of my girls. This is all about Marie and Tara. I want them to have the best life possible. If there has to be a divorce, I want it to impact them as little as possible. They have a few friends whose parents aren't together, so they'll adjust. I just don't want things to be hard on them. The next few days were hard on everyone. Things were a whirlwind of activity. Bonnie went home to her parents' house the next day. I took the girls over to visit her, but I didn't go in. They couldn't stay for very long because Bonnie had to go to the hospital to be with Brandy. The doctors wouldn't let Brandy come home for a couple of more days. Bonnie called me, constantly begging me to speak to her. She sent her parents either singly or together to talk to me. Strangely, it was the unemotional Brenda who was the closest to understanding. One night when the girls were asleep and Bonnie claimed she couldn't handle being away from me for any longer, she conned Brenda into bringing her by the house. She knocked on the door loudly and tried to make me let her in. I called her on my cell phone and told her that the girls were asleep and she'd wake them up by acting like a fool. That wouldn't do her chances of getting custody any good. She told me that if I would just come out and talk to her for 2 minutes, she'd go away. She just needed to hear the sound of my voice. I agreed. I stepped out on the porch and saw Bonnie and her sister, Brenda, sitting in the lounge chairs on our porch. There were 4 chairs there that we sat in sometimes with the kids. I guess she expected me to sit in one of the chairs. She was probably expecting me to sit in the one next to her. I sat on the porch railing opposite the chairs. Hey, Brenda, I said, smiling. Then I turned to my wife. I very slowly let my smile fade and my face change until it showed the anger and the revulsion I felt towards her. I wanted her to see all of the changes in my expression. Then, speaking in the coldest voice I could muster, "You have 2 minutes," I told her. "How are the girls?" she asked. "They're fine." I told her what we'd done that day, and she smiled. "I always knew you'd be a great father. I guess that's why it's so hard for me to believe that you haven't been to the hospital to visit your other daughter, who isn't doing nearly as well. She needs you too, and her mother needs you more than ever." "Holy shit," I said. "Time sure flies when you're listening to bullshit. Your time is up. If you start banging on my door again, I'll call the police." She reached out to grab me. "Gran, I love you. I'm begging you to forgive me and give me one more chance. Give Brandy a chance." As I started to close the door, I heard Brenda tell her, "Leave him alone, Bonnie. Haven't you done enough to him already? He's hurting too, and none of this was his fault. You did this." Bonnie snapped right back at her sister. "Shut the hell up, Brenda. He's mine, and he always will be. You're supposed to be on my side. I already know I messed up. Now I need to fix it. And I'm trying to. Maybe you don't understand this because you've never loved anyone, but I am not going to let him divorce me. It is not going to happen." I could hear the desperation in her voice. The next morning, I woke up and made breakfast for my daughters before dropping them off at school. That was a normal thing. I did it every day anyway. Me making breakfast wasn't normal, but dropping them off at school was. They were very excited. "Brandy comes home today, Daddy," said Marie. "That's great, Angel," I said quietly. I tried to keep the rage out of my voice so my daughter wouldn't think it was directed at her. "Remember the rules, Daddy," said Tara as we got close to their school. "What rules, baby?" I asked. "Marie is too old to be your baby. She's just a girl now. I'm your baby, and Brandy is Mom's baby," said Tara. "Okay, that has been established." I laughed as I let them out. I watched them walk into the school and drove off towards my job thinking that everything was fine. I sat down in my desk and started trying to concentrate on the assignments that needed to go out that day. I've been working and getting absolutely nothing done for about 3 hours when my secretary, Joan, came in and told me that I had 2 calls. Both were urgent. One call was from the police and the other from the hospital. I took the call from the police. My house had been broken into. I quickly ran outside, jumped into my Camaro, and drove home. My alarm wasn't on, which was strange because I was sure I'd set it that morning. There were 2 police officers there. They showed me where a window had been broken on the side of the house. "That's how they got in," said one of the officers. I opened the front door and looked around the house. It hadn't been ransacked. In fact, nothing was missing or damaged. I tried to look at things with a more critical eye. Then I noticed it. The dishes from the girls' breakfast were gone and the dishwasher was running. The dirty clothes hamper was empty and there was a load of laundry in the washer and another in the dryer. When I told the officers that, they laughed. "Someone broke into your house to do your housework for you," they laughed. As we continued through the house, I noticed little things. There were a few things missing. There was a framed picture of Bonnie and me at our wedding missing. It was a special picture because of all of the pictures they took at our wedding. This one was the only one that didn't have Marie in it. Our entire wedding album was still there. In fact, it had been placed on my bed. There was a piece of paper on top of it. Several family pictures, as well as pictures of the girls, were missing, and a few of Bonnie's outfits and personal items were gone. It was very clear what had happened. I'd changed the locks on the house so Bonnie couldn't get in. She'd broken the window and turned off the alarm. I explained it to the officers, and they left after finding out that I didn't want to press charges. I didn't blame them. I was sure that there were donuts out there that needed them. I did wonder why Bonnie hadn't taken the wedding album. It was one of her favorite things. She often leafed her way through it, looking at each picture, each perfect moment in time, captured and held there unchanging as we went through our lives. She must have memorized all of those pictures by now, but she still loved to look at that book. I picked up her note. "Dearest Grant, I'm sorry that I didn't love you at first sight the way that you've always sworn you did me. Be that as it may, you've always been far more important to me than I ever could be to you. You were free when we met to go out and find anyone you wanted. That was one of the ways I knew that you truly loved me. I mean, realistically, who goes out and falls for a chunky girl with a kid when there are tons of slim, attractive girls with no dependents available? It had to be love. I wasn't free, though, to simply find someone that I loved. After our first date, I was sure that I loved you too. But I wasn't free to give my heart to someone just because I loved them. I had to think of my daughter as well. It had to be a good fit for all of us. And it was. After that, my love for you blossomed and continued to grow until it bordered on obsession. It still does. I would do anything to keep you in my life. I don't have to worry about my heart because you will always be there. No one could take your place, ever. No one could ever compare to you in my bed either, and believe me, I'd know. I had my time as a wild girl. You know about this already, and no one ever made me feel the way you did. When you talked about me and my lover laughing at you, you were partially right. He didn't laugh at you because he never knew anything about you. I wouldn't dirty my love for you by even mentioning to him that I was married. I let him think that I was just some sluttish fat girl who needed sex. The person laughing at you was me, Grant. I laughed that you would even think that anyone could ever replace you. It's still funny. There will never be another man for me. Surprisingly, he didn't even remember me from before. That only goes to show you how shallow an a-hole he is. But it's also why I needed him. Then he only had one good thing going for him. He didn't have a big tool. Yours is so much better. But he's quick and he's really potent. I knew he could get me pregnant and quickly. I also knew that he has no soul and would never wonder about his child. After all, he left after getting me pregnant the first time and never tried to contact me about Marie. She's never been his daughter. She's always been yours. I love you, Grant. I really thought that this would be a good thing. I didn't enjoy the sex. I needed to use lube to even get him inside of me. I didn't kiss him. I didn't have an orgasm either time. I didn't even move. I just laid there and let him have sex with me. It was even worse the second time because I knew how it would be, and the first time was so bad. Both times I came home and took at least 5 showers. I just couldn't get clean enough. I felt really bad after both times too. The only thing that cheered me up after both was making love to you and blocking out the painful memories, but not the guilt. I was really glad when I found out I was pregnant because it meant that I wouldn't have to see him again. He complained both times about me being a dead sex partner and probably wouldn't have done it again. I did this not because I enjoyed it, but because I wanted to share something wonderful with the only man I have ever loved that we didn't seem to be able to do without help. If I'd known that it would endanger our family, I never would have done it. I did it for our family, not to tear it apart. It seemed like something so small to give for something so wonderful. I had to endure a little bit of unpleasantness. You were never supposed to know. My body and all of me have belonged to only you, Grant, since we've met. I didn't think that letting someone borrow one tiny piece of it would cause you not to want the whole thing anymore. Especially if we got something that we wanted very badly. Grant, you love Marie with all of your heart and soul. If the only way for us to have her would be for me to have sex with someone else, would you want me to do it? Would you say no, knowing how much you've grown to love her? I don't think you'd like it, but you'd do anything for your daughter. You've said it so many times. It's the same thing with Brandy. The same man, the same situation. Whether you want to believe this or not, Brandy is your daughter. I still maintain that. You've taken care of her for all of her brief life so far. As to who made her, I had sex with both of you. You made love to me the day she was conceived too. Both times, you and I had sex in the morning before I left to go to him, and again after I'd been with him. I really believe that you got me in the mood and got my body ready to receive his sperm. You are at least partially responsible for our child's conception. The other thing is the legality of the situation. Grant, I know you're hurt, but you were legally responsible for our daughter. I think in your pain you forget that the evening she was born, after you helped deliver her and cut her umbilical cord yourself, you must have been so happy that you forgot something. While you were jumping around and shaking people's hands and telling them that your name was Daddy, you signed her birth certificate. In the eyes of the law, as well as mine, you were her father. I'm not trying to trap you into anything, Grant. I'm trying to show you who you are. I told you before that you would love her as much as you do your other daughters, and I'm willing to risk my happiness and a part of my life to prove it to you. Always remember, Grant, that I love you more than anything else in this world. Not being with you will hurt me badly, but just like you, I'd sacrifice anything for my babies. I only hope that the old saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder, works for us as well. She signed it, yours forever, Bonnie. I had no idea what the hell she was talking about. In a couple of months, we'd be divorced and I might have custody of my 2 daughters, or she might. It would be up to the courts to decide. At least that was what I thought. My heart missed Bonnie, but my pride wouldn't allow forgiveness. Reading her letter did not soften my stance toward her, and I still wasn't ready to forgive her. On the other hand, I was ready to find this Denny creep and break his bones for running out on Marie. All of that was forgotten when the phone began ringing. It was the hospital again. It was probably Bonnie calling me from the hospital, wondering whether or not I'd read her letter. "What?" I said into the phone. "Grant, you have to come over here now," said Bonnie's mother, Mary. "Jim has had a heart attack, and there's a problem with Brandy," she said. Brandy is not my problem, I thought. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I got to the hospital, 2 nurses grabbed me and tried to pull me in opposite directions. One, a big black woman, was trying to pull me towards pediatrics. She had an evil look on her face. She was scary as hell, and I thought for a while I was going to have to deck that witch. The other nurse was from the cardiac unit, and she was equally stout. She just had a kinder expression on her face. She eventually won after they had a conversation about which need was more pressing. "I hate deadbeat dads," said the black woman as she let me go. "I promise I'll come and pay whatever I owe you or sign the papers so my health care can take care of it. Until the divorce goes through, I know that this is my problem." She looked at me with an expression that said she had no idea what the hell I was babbling about and left. I went into the cardiac ward and saw Jim. Actually, his heart attack had been mild. Mary was by his side. "He's going to be laid up for a while," she said. "I'm sorry, I won't be much help to you. But my husband has to take first priority." "Don't worry about it, Mary," I said. "If there's anything I can do to help you out, let me know. I can handle my girls easily. I've done it before. And while Bonnie was pregnant, I kind of got used to doing most of it anyway. I just need to work out a schedule. Besides, if there's a problem, I can always just call Bonnie if I have to." Mary looked at me and said, "No one told you?" "No one told me what?" I asked. Then a doctor came and got Mary and took her away to talk about Jim's care. I figured I'd go out and find Bonnie to talk to her. Maybe she could tell me what was going on. But I had no intention of dealing with her issues or hers then. When I got outside, the big mean nurse grabbed my hand and led me to pediatrics. "We've been calling you all day," she snapped. "I know that your wife disappearing is hard on your family, but you still have responsibilities." I had no idea what she was talking about. She gave me a couple of papers to sign and forced me into a wheelchair. Then she put the baby into my arms and they pushed me towards the door. "You're lucky we're so busy today," she snapped. "When you didn't show up to pick her up this morning like you were supposed to, we were supposed to have called the Family Services Agency and had you arrested. What kind of an a-hole abandons a newborn?" I sat there in the wheelchair with the most surprised look possible on my face. If Brenda hadn't come walking by, I might still be sitting there. Mom told me to help you out, said Brenda. Dad is going to be here for a couple of days, but then he'll go home. He's going to have a few restrictions in terms of diet and exercise, but he'll be fine. She's more worried about you. Brenda looked at me sitting there in the wheelchair and smiled. She called to one of her mom's friends. He was waiting to see Jim. She asked him to drive her car to my house and she'd bring him right back. For some reason that I still can't figure out, he didn't grumble at all. I guess the thought of being in a car in close quarters with a woman as attractive as Brenda was its own reward. Here, Brenda, why don't you take this? I said, indicating the baby. Oh no, she claimed. I have no maternal instincts. I'd probably break it. You're the one who's supposed to be super dad. You can handle it. Besides, there's something really weird going on here. We went out to my Camaro and I gingerly got in. I'd have to look around the house for the new car seat that we bought for the baby. As we pulled out of the parking lot and stopped at a red light, Brenda looked over at me. That is the weirdest shit, she said. What? I asked. She's quiet and calm, said Brenda. I visited her every day since she was born. I've never seen this baby quiet. Are you sure they gave you the right one? Don't start, I said. I'm only keeping this thing until your sister gets back from screwing whomever she went off with. In the meantime, I intend to go ahead with my divorce plans and maybe I can get her charged with abandonment for running off and leaving this thing. Huh, she said. I'm serious, Brenda. This is bullshit, I spat. Huh, she said. Huh, my arse. I'm unloading this thing as soon as I can. I'll give her 2 days to get her, but back here. Then I'm taking this thing to social services and explaining the situation to them. They can find her a home or foster parents or something like that. Huh, said Brenda as we pulled up in front of my house. Do you need anything? She asked. No, I spat. We bought formula the day she was born and haven't opened it yet. Your sister is supermom. We have everything we need. Grant, you're a great guy, she said. What Bonnie did was flat out wrong. I don't agree at all with what she did, but I do know that she's tearing herself up over losing you. I think in some ways, as much as she loves being a mom, she'd started to resent this baby. That's why she left. She has to get her head straight. It wasn't good for the baby to have her mom blaming her in part for wrecking your family. Please, don't you take it out on her also? She's only a baby. Can you just wait and settle your issues with Bonnie when she gets back? I looked at her and realized that she was right. I nodded my head. Grant, Brenda said, grabbing my face. It was the first time I remember her reaching out to touch anyone. What I said before about you being the only person she was quiet for, I meant it. She wasn't even this peaceful when Bonnie held her. Maybe she'd already sensed that her mommy wasn't feeling good about having her. You're the best man I know, Grant. Let my niece feel that. You don't have to accept her as being your child, but she is related to you. Marie is still yours, isn't she? I nodded my head. Of course she is, I spat. Well, just accept Brandy as Marie and Tara's half-sister, if not as your daughter. Think of her as their cousin or something. Maybe she isn't yours, but she's part of your family. I nodded grudgingly. I loved her so much, Brenda, I said sadly. Grant, she still loves you. She hasn't given up on you at all. And she's not going off with anyone either. There is no one except for you, she said. She was getting ready to say something else, but we were interrupted. The girls came running out of the house excitedly. They were so busy cooing and looking at the baby that they didn't notice that their mother wasn't there. I sensed challenging times ahead. Meanwhile, Brenda was at the convent. I walked down the once familiar halls with a very somber expression on my face. The expression was not out of respect for the place I found myself in. My heart was breaking. I felt like I was being torn in two. I missed Grant so much that I wanted to die. That had been one of my options, and it was still on the table. If this plan didn't work, I still might. Once upon a time, I'd expected to live out my life within these walls. I think I wanted to be a teacher then, but it was over 10 years ago, so I may be wrong. Bonnie, how good it is to see you again, said Reverend Mother Agnes. She was Sister Agnes when I was here, and she was old then. She's positively ancient now. As I looked at her face, I could still see some of the smiling face of the woman from back then, but she was far more serious now. She also had a strength that wasn't based on physicality. Her body may be failing her, but her emotional or spiritual strength must have at least doubled. It's good to see you again too, Mother Agnes, I said. Bonnie, you're coming here as a lay worker to help us. There's no need to stand on formality. You aren't a part of the order anymore, but we're still friends. You can just call me Agnes. We spent a few more minutes going over what I'd be doing for the order for the next few months. My stay here was open-ended. I'd signed on to help install a computer system in the convent. It could literally take years to drag them kicking and screaming out of the dark ages. I hoped that it wouldn't take that long for me to be able to go home. Every minute that I spent away from my family was torture, but it would be worth anything to keep us together. The solutions that Grant had come up with for my betrayal were all unacceptable. After he found out what I'd done, I started thinking about solutions myself, and none of them were any good. I'd even come up with the idea of giving Brandy up for adoption. Strangely, that wasn't one of Grant's ideas, and I knew why. He and I both strongly believe that a child needs their parents. Even one parent is better than none. So since he didn't want to be her father, he never envisioned the possibility that I'd give her up. Grant was being silly though, because I love all of my daughters, but as much as I love Brandy, if I had to choose between her and my husband, she'd lose. I wouldn't abandon her. I'd make sure she was placed with a good family, perhaps even with a family that was related to us. But there was simply no way I could take my other girl's father away from them. And then there were my own selfish needs for Grant as well. Alone in my room, I pulled out my iPad. There was no Wi-Fi network in the convent yet, so I had to use it over the 3G network. I lightly touched an app, and my screen filled with a grid of square windows. There were 6 squares in the grid. I tapped one, and it filled my screen. I started crying silently as I looked at it. I turned up the volume as I watched Grant sitting in the rocking chair by our fireplace. He was holding Brandy and rocking her to sleep. It was no surprise to me that she was quiet for Grant. He has such a way with kids. I watched as Marie came in and sat down next to him. That girl followed her dad around like a puppy. There was no way I could have separated them. I really have the feeling that if it came down to a choice, my daughter at 14 would have chosen to stay with her dad in a divorce. Grant handed the baby to her older sister so he could get out of the rocking chair. She handed her back when he was standing up and followed him to our bedroom. Grant had moved her bassinet into our room, the softie. I started crying when I saw it. He put her down to sleep and stayed there with Marie by his side until she drifted off. Then he went into the girls' room and read Tara a bedtime story. Marie was staring down at something in her hands the whole time. I couldn't see what it was. I couldn't believe it. Grant had bought Marie a cell phone. He knew that I didn't want our kids to become phone junkies. She was only 14. I calmed myself down and smiled. I was sure he was just giving them a few things to distract them from feeling bad about me not being there. Tara is still afraid of the dark. When Marie is in the room with her, it's not a problem though. Grant had put a night light by her bed. Tara seemed to have a few new toys too. I hoped he'd get over his anger at me before the girls took over the house completely. Over the next few months, I ordered and installed computers in the convent. I held classes and taught the nuns basic computer skills. I also taught them how to use the basic types of computer software. I had the convent connected to the internet and installed a small business network. I threw myself into my work, and at the end of each day, I returned to my room and engaged in my favorite pastime, watching my family. As I'd known he would, Grant had cared for our daughters even better than I'd expected. Against everything he'd said, a bond had formed between Grant and our youngest daughter. Tears had rolled down my cheeks as he'd walked through the living room rocking the infant in his arms as she'd gone through the pain of teething. He'd given her ice chips as he had with Tara. The thing that hurt me the most was when he'd begun to talk to the baby as he walked with her each night. He told her all about her sisters when they were younger and how she would grow up to be smart and beautiful just like them. Then he'd begun talking about his relationship and courtship with me. I couldn't tell if he was telling the baby those things because he really expected her to understand them or if he was only talking to work out his own demons. He talked about exactly how much he loved me and how much I'd meant to him. I'd been everything to him. Hearing him say it and continuously use the past tense hurt me. Hearing about the way he truly felt about what I'd done hurt me even more. After that night, I hadn't watched him for a few days and couldn't work because I was too depressed and hurt. I began then to see how badly what I had done hurt him. I began to wonder, and not for the first time, if what I'd done had been truly worth what I was going through now. I also began to feel doubt about whether or not my plan would succeed. I was no longer sure that my husband would ever want me back. My sister routinely visited my family and seemed to be becoming closer to Grant. That was something that I hadn't planned on. In fact, none of this was going according to my plan. I'd expected this to take no longer than 2 or 3 months. It was nearing a year. There had been a few things that I considered triumphs over the past 11 months. One had been when my father had recovered from his heart attack. My mother had offered to take Brandy, but Grant had refused. He told her that she had enough problems with Dad's health. He'd hold on until I returned. I was sure that his feelings for our daughter were growing. Another had been getting him the DVDs. Denny had a habit of recording some of his trysts. I had taken the DVDs from him. I hadn't wanted anyone to ever find out what I'd done. Anyway, one night, I'd heard Grant telling Brenda about how he was sure that I had been cheating on him for weeks, probably years, and that I'd probably been back in hooker mode. It hurt me that he thought I could do that to him. Brenda was the only one who knew where I was. I called my sister and told her to leave the DVDs somewhere that Grant might find them. Brenda asked Grant if she could look through my clothes for something to wear while she helped him do the housework. As she and Grant looked through a drawer trying to find her a sweatshirt, Grant discovered the DVDs. I knew that it was risky, allowing Grant to see another man having sex with me. If he took it the wrong way, I might never get him back. But I also knew that if he didn't get over his idea that I'd been screwing Denny for pleasure, I might still not get him back. I'd watched the video through my hidden cameras along with Grant, watching his reaction. Grant had watched as I lay there on the motel bed like a mannequin. Denny had pulled my legs apart and tried to mount me. He couldn't get his tool in me. I'd looked at the camera a few times, hoping it would show that my expression was very sad on one DVD and disgusted on the second. The conversation between us, both during sex and after, had also been interesting. After the first time, he'd quipped that my glory hole wasn't very tight. I told him it was because his tool was too small. He told me that he was only trying to make conversation. I told him that eternity was the time between when he'd climax and when he'd go. The snappy patter was even worse the second and final time. He told me I was a dead duck. I told him that he was nothing to get excited over and he didn't know what he was doing. He told me things might be better if I sucked his meat to get him ready. I told him to do it himself because I only did that for my husband. I told him I'd rather just have sex and just get it over with. After it was over, he told me that he normally screwed anything that moved, but he didn't want to have sex with me ever again. 2 times was enough. I should lose his phone number, fine, I said. My husband was way better in bed anyway. I was sure that hearing the dialogue between us might help Grant get over his hurt. As I watched his reaction, I couldn't tell. A few weeks later, Brenda was back and asked Grant again how he felt about me. For the first time since this had begun, he didn't answer in anger. He just said that he didn't know. I was happier than I'd been since I left home. A few nights later, I almost had a heart attack. Grant was holding Brandy as usual, while he and the girls watched TV. Brandy had been making the usual baby cooing sounds, and she spit out her bottle and clearly said, "Dada." Marie and Tara had smiled and laughed. Grant had looked angry at first and glared at the baby. She looked straight at him and said it again, smiling, "Dada." Grant had just shaken his head and gave her the bottle back. Something else had happened a few days after that. Grant had asked Brenda to watch the girls for him for an evening. She'd agreed, but asked him where he was going. He just told her he was going out. That bothered me because if he started dating, there was a good chance that I'd lose him. In our state, I only had a few months more before Grant could divorce me for abandonment. So I couldn't take the chance that he'd start dating. That evening, Grant went out. I walked into a bar to get a drink. All right, it wasn't an accident. I'd picked that particular place at that particular time for a reason. I'd done some checking and found out who this Denny a-hole was. He was a local scumbag. He wasn't exactly a criminal. He was just a lazy, good-for-nothing scumbag who'd gotten lucky and married a rich older woman. His wife controlled everything in the relationship, but it still left Denny the time and the money to screw anything that wasn't nailed down. This bar was where he liked to hang out. I came here seeking answers. He had a few friends that he liked to brag to about his exploits. He was already holding court when I sat down at the bar near his table. He was bragging about some dancer that he'd supposedly been with. I joined the conversation as if I was one of his old friends. "Dude, you've moved up in the world," I said. "Denny, I've been out of town for about a year. I went to Cali. You should check out the chicks I brought back with me." My use of his name really made him think that he knew me. "California women, huh?" he asked. "Maybe we should get together." "I'm not sure you're up to it," I laughed. "Last time I was here, you were sneaking off with some chunky chick." "Oh, please," he said. "Those older married women are the real test. Screwing some young chick that's really never been plowed is okay. But when you get a bigger, older, married chick chasing you, then you know you're something." I nodded my head as if I almost believed him, but needed some convincing. I leaned over and told him to meet me in the parking lot so we could talk. Of course, his friends wanted to come, but I told them if he vouched for them after we met the girls, then maybe we'd bring them along next time. They even paid for my beer. Denny and I headed out to the parking lot with big smiles on our faces. He was grinning because of his addiction to new glory holes and what he thought was about to happen to him. I was smiling because of what was about to happen to him too. Let me set the scene for you. Denny is a pretty big guy, bigger than me in fact, but his wife had pretty much tamed him. He was like those toothless old tigers in the zoo. His wife wore his balls on a chain around her neck. He looked scary to guys who were smaller than him and more domesticated. But just like those tigers from the zoo, when you took them out into the wild, a lot of them refused to come out of the cage. We got into the parking lot, and I sat on the hood of Denny's M3. "Tell me what happened with the chunky chick from last year," I snapped. Denny enjoyed telling his little tales to his friends, so he launched right into it. "That witch was really into me," he began. "I had the feeling that I knew her from somewhere. Like maybe we went to school together or something. It was like she already knew me and had always wanted herself a big piece of Denny." He laughed at his own joke and then noticed that I wasn't laughing. "She actually begged me to suck my meat. She acted like giving me a blowjob was something she'd always dreamed of," he said. "And she got so wet that I thought I was going to drown. She was humping that big fat bum against me so hard that I was afraid for a while. She didn't want me to stop, but I was exhausted. We must have drilled for at least a couple of hours straight. She even came back for more. So she must have liked what she got." "So, are you still doing her?" I asked. "Hell no," he snapped. "I just hit him and quit him. I try to be careful, especially with the married ones. That stupid witch wanted to leave her husband for me. She actually begged me to marry her and have kids with her. That's one thing I'm proud of. I've probably cis a couple of hundred women, but not one of them has ever been able to pin a crumb snatcher on me. Why the hell would I ever want one of those vile, nasty little critters?" He just sucked in a breath to say something else when I hit him. My first punch stunned him, and he staggered backwards. "Why the foo?" he began as I hit him again. This time, my hand connected with something more solid and blood erupted from his face. "You broke my nose," he screamed. "If you don't tell me the truth, I'm gonna break your butt," I said. "What do you want to know?" he asked, spitting out blood. I smiled as he cowered away from me. He had no guts at all. But then it's pretty tough to have guts when someone else has your balls. At that moment, my hatred for Denny turned to pity. I also abandoned my original plan to tell his wife what he'd done. Having that information get out could only hurt my girls, Marie especially. We were all better off without any of this getting out. From his statement about vile little critters, I realized that Denny didn't know that Marie or Brandy even existed, let alone that he was their sperm donor. It was better off for all concerned if he never knew. "The truth," I said. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. You never know what might start me beating your arse again. I'm not one of your little friends, so don't bother trying to make yourself look good. Just tell me the truth." "Okay, the truth is that I was shocked when she came onto me. Half of the women around here don't fall for my shit anymore. My wife is so old that she doesn't care about having sex very often, and when she does it's like screwing a wrinkled-up corpse. I use a lot of hookers. So when this woman came to me, I didn't care if she was a little chunky. She was pretty, and she had big tits. It was free sex. Why the hell would I look a gift horse in the mouth? But the sex was awful. She didn't suck my meat. Shit, she didn't even take her clothes off. She acted like she didn't even want me to touch her, and she called me names after it was over. He looked at me to get my reaction. I was sure I'd never see her again, he said. But a few weeks later, she came after me again. I figured that maybe the first time was just bad timing or she was in a bad mood. But the second time was even worse. She didn't even move. The whole time that I was screwing her, she had this look on her face like she hated me. I swear I knew her from somewhere. I just couldn't put it together. Then I noticed that when I came in her, she closed her legs and tilted upwards like she was trying to make sure my sperm didn't come out of her. The look on her face was so hateful that I just told her it was going to be the last time we ever got together. I had the feeling that she just hated men in general or me in particular. She seemed like the kind of woman who'd cut your throat while you were asleep. He wiped the blood from his busted nose and looked at me. She really looked like she was ashamed of herself or she wanted to cry. Both times, as soon as we were done, I'm telling you she had tears in her eyes. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought that she was screwing me to punish herself for something. I'm sure she was married though, because she kept bringing him up. That was pretty weird too. Most of the married women I screw never talk about their husbands. It's almost as if talking about them makes them feel even guiltier about having sex with me. Maybe in their minds, if they don't talk about them, their husbands don't exist for a short time, and they don't have to feel guilty. But this witch, sorry, he'd noticed the way my expression changed when he called her that. Anyway, this lady kept bringing him up. She kept saying things like, "My husband's meat is bigger than yours," or "My husband does way better than you do." It was just creepy. I kept wondering if she was going to bring him next time and make me watch him screw her so I'd know how to do it the right way. He shook his head. Then there was the fact that she wouldn't touch me at all, even when we were done. A lot of women want you to hold them or just talk to them afterwards. So they don't feel cheap and used. But this lady didn't want either. She just wanted me to get the hell out of Dodge. She even made some kind of joke that I didn't understand about, coming and going. He looked to see if I'd laugh. I'd already heard it on the DVD, so there was no need for him to explain it. It made me think, he said. I mean, if she was so into her old man, why wasn't she screwing him? Then it hit me. She'd probably cheated on him, and he found out and left her. She couldn't screw him, so she went out looking for guys like me. She needed someone to screw her, but she hated us at the same time because her going out and screwing around on him is what caused her to lose Mr. Wonderful in the first place. Life is strange, and people are really complex. He looked at me as if he'd just said something that was extremely profound. Get the hell out of my sight, Denny, I said. But what about the California bee? He caught himself. Well, who are you? He asked. Mr. Wonderful, I said as I walked away. I had a lot to think about. I'd parked a couple of blocks away just in case there were problems. Denny was far more of a wimp than I'd ever expected. He didn't even try to hit me once. He never fought back. He just started spilling his guts. I felt bad about the whole thing. In fact, I felt like shit. I probably could have just asked him away from his friends and gotten him to tell me what I wanted to know. Plan B would have been to show him the videos and make him come clean about it. But when he started talking about my girls like they were, what did he call them? Vile, nasty critters. He deserved an but whipping even though he didn't know they existed. Denny was an a-hole, plain and simple. But that was no reason for me to lose control of myself and resort to violence. What if I gotten caught? What would my girls do if I was in jail? Besides me, who loved them? Their Aunt Brenda was just not the motherly type. Their grandmother and grandfather loved them but were simply too old to take care of them. There was only me. Of course, Bonnie loved them too. But where was she? The talk with Denny had actually made me see things in a different light. This was so complicated. Everything in life isn't just black or white. There are a lot of shades of gray. The only women in my life right now were my daughters and Bonnie's daughter. The thrumming of my Camaro's engine only seemed to make me want to re-examine my situation more. There were a lot of issues at stake here. Some of them were silly. Did Bonnie actually cheat on me? Hell yes, she did. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was right about everything that I said. She did cheat. Did her reasons make sense? Hell no, they didn't. We were perfectly fine. We might have had a baby on our own eventually, but she had to go and mess with the mix. On the other hand, neither of us was getting any younger, especially her. If we'd waited for eventually, there was a good possibility that it may never have come. As much as I didn't want to admit it, maybe the way she went about it was totally wrong, but there was a reason for what she did. I'd have liked it a lot better if we'd talked about it, and then gone with artificial insemination or one of those medical things instead of her going out and letting some a-hole screw her, though. The rest of the issues were a lot murkier. Did I think that Bonnie loved me? I was still very sure that she did. Even that a-hole Denny had seemed to be convinced that she loved me. Do I still love Bonnie? As much as I want to jump up and say, hell no, I hate that cheating woman. I can't. She's been gone for nearly a year. Brandy is beginning to talk and trying to walk now. I haven't been out on one date and have no plans to. But every day and every night I wonder where she is. I'm sure she'd found someone else and moved on from me and my girls. But I found myself sometimes wishing that there had been a way to work all of this out. More than anything, I tell myself that I wish none of this had happened. But if I had to be honest with myself, I'm not sure that's true anymore. If none of this had happened, I wouldn't have Brandy. And there's no use pretending that I don't love that little girl. I love her at least as much as I do the other two. She might not be the child of my loins, but she's definitely the child of my heart. I'm at least as much, if not more, her father than that a-hole Denny. He wasn't the one she looked at, locked her eyes on, and called Dada. That was me, and if I have my way, it always will be. Meanwhile, Bonnie was still in the convent. My time in the convent had taught me a lot of things that I never expected to learn. Before I'd been here for a week, I'd been approached about buying beer, pills, and other things for some of the novices. Apparently, the modern age had come to nuns as well. During my time here, women who needed things like that would never have even tried to enter the service of the Lord. Apparently, the church's rules on things like abstinence and chastity have gone by the wayside as well. A few months ago, I'd gone into the storage room on my floor and discovered two of the men who were supposed to be rebuilding the wall on the north side of the complex. My shock over seeing them in the house, when no men were ever supposed to be here, was secondary to my shock at what they were doing. Two of them were screwing one of the novices. I quickly closed the door and went about my business. A few days later, I ran into one of the workmen, and he told me that in return for my silence, he might be willing to throw me a quick sex from time to time. He was sure that with my having been married, I had to miss it sometimes. I slapped the shit out of him. I did actually miss it. And I missed it not sometimes, but every day. But I didn't miss random sex with some guy I barely knew. I missed having my husband make love to me and sometimes just screw the shit out of me. Despite the circumstances that brought me back here, I was still a one-man woman through and through. I missed Grant with every fiber of my being, so there was no way I'd sully the memory of what we had just to screw some a-hole in a closet. I cried myself to sleep again that night. I couldn't even bear to watch my family. More and more, I was beginning to realize that Grant was probably never going to get over his hatred for what I'd done. It was enough for me that he, at least on the surface, had accepted my daughter. Maybe he didn't claim her, but it was obvious even to me, who only watched them on video, that he loved her. I awoke the next morning to the sound of my cell phone ringing. It rang 4 times and then stopped before the voicemail would pick it up. Then it rang 4 times again. Someone wanted to talk to me badly. I picked the phone up and answered sleepily. "Hello," I croaked. "Bonnie, get your bum home now," said my sister Brenda. "Why?" I asked. "Grant went out last night," she said. "It won't work," I said. "If he's dating now, it's even more reason to stay away. He's probably getting over me and trying to move on." "No, dummy," she snapped. "Can I tell you what I think happened before you jump to some stupid conclusion? You already made one dumbass decision that nearly screwed up your life. Are you ready to listen this time?" I really didn't like the way she was talking to me, but Brenda has never been a people person. Maybe that's why she was a model. She had no human feelings and really was just a mannequin to hang clothes on. "Go ahead," I said. "For the first time since you left, Grant wanted to go out last night. We've tried to get him to go out a lot of times, but he never would. At first, I was a bit jealous," she said. "I always figured that if the two of you never got back together, maybe I'd give Grant a shot. He really is a good guy." I couldn't believe my own sister would say that. I got a bit pissed, but I tried not to let it show. "Anyway, he went out," she continued. "And his big date only lasted for about 45 minutes. Well, maybe being a first date, they just weren't compatible," I said. "But if he started dating, sooner or later he'll find someone. There aren't very many women stupid enough to let him get away. Can I tell the story, or what?" asked Brenda. "Sorry," I said. "When he came home, I noticed that his hands were busted up. Not badly, but it looked like he'd been in a fight," she said. My sudden intake of air caused her to laugh. "You do still love him," she said, laughing. "Of course I do," I snapped. This whole thing was never about whether or not I love him. I'll love Grant until there's nothing left of anything anywhere, and probably even after that. Get on with the story. So, I asked him about it, and he said that he fell. He really isn't a good liar, is he? Who puts their knuckles down to catch themselves if they fall? But he didn't want to talk about it, so I didn't push. This morning, a friend of mine told me that your old friend Denny got busted real bad. His lip was swollen up so it looked like a balloon and his nose was broken. I went over to the house again early this morning so the girls could make me breakfast. I'm their only female role model since their mother ran out on them. What choice did I have, Brenda? I said. I was beginning to cry myself. Anyway, we sat down at the table. Marie said grace as she always does, and Grant threw in your name at the end. Marie kind of sneered. Tara just thought about it. After breakfast, I asked Grant why he'd done it, and he told me that he'd been thinking about you a lot lately. So I asked him if that was why he'd started dating. He just smiled and told me that he didn't think he would ever really look for anyone to replace you. He just wasn't interested. I asked him if he still loved you. For the first time since you've been gone, he wasn't angry. He just said that he loved you with all of his heart, and the thing he regrets most about all of this is that he never talked to you about all of this before he drove you away. But he hopes that you're happy wherever you are and whoever you're with. But he didn't drive me away. I snapped. And I'm not with anyone except him. So shouldn't you drag your butt home and tell him that? She asked. I never answered her. I grabbed my purse and keys and ran out to my car, clutching my phone. I didn't take the time to pack or to change clothes. I just ran out to the car in my long flannel nightgown. Surprisingly enough, none of the men I saw at gas stations along the way even noticed that anything was wrong or said a word. It was always the women and girls who pointed at me and laughed. My phone rang again. I checked the screen and saw that it was Brenda again. I answered it. Well, did you think about what I asked you? She snapped. Let's just say that I'm giving it serious consideration, I laughed. Good, she said. You may be crazy at times, but you're still a great sister, and I think the two of you need each other. And you may be an emotionless mannequin with absolutely no but you're the best sister ever, I said. Then I hung up and concentrated on driving. Meanwhile, Grant was with his girls. We were late getting home that evening. After all of the drama we'd had on the drive to the girls' schools and daycare this morning, I decided that we needed a treat. The drama wasn't anything the girls did. It was something that I'd caused when I mentioned their mom. So we stopped at McDonald's for dinner. I figured we'd sit in front of the TV together and munch and bond. That idea seemed doomed, because as soon as Marie got into the car and hugged me, she started in again. Why did you have to mention her, Daddy? She threw us away. We don't need her, she said. Marie, honey, there's a difference between the words love and need, I said. I guess I understand why you're confused. You're going through the same thing I did. At first, I was very hurt by what she did. I don't know why she did it, but she did. After I found out about it, maybe I didn't handle it as well as I could have. I think your mother just felt that she was pushed into a corner with no way to go. So she just went away to think about it. Marie didn't actually know all of the circumstances. She and the other girls were too young for that. All she knew was that her mom had disappeared. No, Daddy, snapped Marie. What she did was she bailed. All of that stuff she gave me about living up to your responsibilities. But when it was her turn, she ran away. She left you and me and Tara and even Brandy. She's no mother. You're right about that, said Tara, who was just getting into the car. We continued to talk about it all the way to the daycare center where we picked up Brandy. Then we talked about it all the way to McDonald's. Then other issues as usual took precedence, such as Tara, who tried to do everything she could to emulate her older sister. Tara had decided that since Marie spent so much time on her phone that she, at 10 years old, needed one too. That was the main topic of discussion when we walked into our house. Tara, you're only 10, said Marie. Daddy is not going to buy you an iPhone. You're only a little kid. I'm not, said Tara. Look at the trend. When Dad was young, nobody had a cell phone until they hit their 20s and got a job. You got a phone when you were 14. I need a phone now, and I'm 10. Brandy will get a phone when she's 5 and starts school. That way she can call Dad if her applesauce is too cold or somebody says something mean to her. Tara was so busy making her point that she never noticed until long after the rest of us did. Marie was holding the bags of food. She promptly dropped them and her mouth dropped open. Tara turned to see what had caused her sister and Hero to drop the food. I was holding onto Brandy's tiny hand as she slowly took a few halting steps. Now that she had the general gist of that walking thing, she wanted to walk all the time unless she was tired or afraid. When she saw Bonnie come out of the bedroom, Brandy reached for me immediately. Marie stood there with her mouth open and anger forming on her face. Hi, Mom. Don't I deserve an iPhone? Asked Tara, not missing a beat. What does your dad say? Asked Bonnie, walking past her. She made a beeline for Brandy. Can I hold her? She asked, reaching for her. Brandy was having none of it. She yelled, Dada, and started crying, even as Bonnie's hands came near her. Bonnie stepped back away from Brandy, who calmed down as I picked her up. Why are you here? Did you forget something? Asked Marie. I watched her face as she answered. I missed you girls, and I missed your dad, she said slowly and calmly. And someone told me that maybe your dad wasn't quite as angry with me as he was. You should have stayed gone forever, said Marie, stomping away. So do I get my iPhone? Asked Tara. I picked up the food and took the bags to the girls' room. Marie found them a movie to watch while they ate, and I promised her that we'd talk later. I went back down to the living with Brandy as usual in my arms. She was getting sleepy, and this was near the time that I'd normally walk around the living room carrying her and talking to her as she drifted off to sleep. Wow, you made yourself at home, I said to Bonnie. Her eyes lit up, and she smiled at me. Actually, this is what I had on when I spoke to my sister on the phone this morning. I rushed right out and came here. I didn't bother taking time to change or to pack. When she said that maybe you and I could talk, that's all it took, said Bonnie. Is there someone you need to call or something? I asked. That got another smile out of her. She leaned back on the couch and just watched as I began walking around the living room rocking Brandy in my arms. You're not very subtle, she said. There's no one that I need to call that's more important than talking to you. Well, I guess I could call the mother superior of the convent that I was working at, but I'm sure she'll understand. She told me several times over the past 11 months, 2 weeks and 3 days that I needed to come home and face my problems instead of running away from them. Grant, there aren't any other men in my life, other than you. There never have been, and there never will be. She continued to simply stare at me. Why are you staring at me like that? I asked. Because I've missed you so much, dummy, she said. And because I've watched you do this every night for the past 11 months. You are the best father I could imagine. What do you mean? I asked. You've been imagining seeing me taking care of Denny's baby. I was getting pissed all over again. Grant, she isn't Denny's baby, she said. She's your baby. She's even afraid of me right now. It'll take her some time to get used to me. She's bonded to you. You're her father. You're her dada. I was there when she first called you that. No, you weren't, I said. Yes, I was, she said. She went over to the bookshelf and took one of the bookends from the middle shelf. Camera, she said. I have a few of them all over the house. I haven't actually been here with the people I love, but I haven't been very far away either. So you spied on us, I said. Grant, call it what you want to, but I couldn't live without you. I needed to be able to see you even if I couldn't be with you. What if there'd been an accident or an emergency and you needed me? What if some woman had tried to come into your life? I needed to know what was going on with you and the girls, she said. You did a far better job without me than I could ever have imagined. Of course, the girls wrapped you around their little fingers, especially Marie. My God, Grant, you bought her a $300 cell phone when she was 14. Is there any wonder that Tara thinks she's getting one now? She stood up and came slowly towards me. You can probably throw me out of the house if you want to, but you need to know that I was right all along. I hate what it took to prove it to you. It took an entire year of our lives just to get you to see something that you knew in your heart all along. She shook her head. This whole thing was my fault, Grant. I was wrong as hell. I just got an idea in my head, and I never stopped to consider how you'd feel about it. All I thought was how great it would be. I just kept imagining you holding me as our baby grew in my belly. It became an obsession. After a while, I couldn't think of anything else. How I got us there no longer seemed to matter. In the back of my mind, I always imagined that it wasn't Denny that got me pregnant. That's why I came home and raped you after both times with him. Not that we didn't make love most nights anyway, but those nights I just needed so badly to pretend. I guess after a while it wasn't even necessary to pretend anymore. I truly in my heart believed that she was your baby. She stood right next to me, walking beside me as Brandy snored away on my shoulder. What I did to you was awful, she said. I deceived you, I cheated on you, and I lied to you. I swear to you I'll never do it again. I just want a chance to be with my family again. I know I'll need to earn their trust and their love all over again. But all I can do is to try, if you give me the chance. So now we know why you're here, I said. Why did you think I was here? She asked. I guess I thought that you'd come to get your baby, I said. When you left, we'd been discussing a divorce and me trying for custody of my two. I wanted nothing to do with you or Brandy. I remember, she said. If I'd offered to put her up for adoption, would you have taken me back? I think even back then I was sure that a baby should be with its mother, I said. So you and she both needed to go. I thought that you and she should just go away and I'd get custody of my girls. Or you'd get custody and I'd get visitation rights and visit my girls as often as I legally could. So what if I offered to take her off of your hands right now? She asked. I'd throw you out of my house and see you in court, I said. You abandoned her. Good God, Grant, she said. I was only making conversation. I wouldn't dream of trying to take her from you. Not that I could. That isn't why I came back. Then why did you come back? I asked her. Grant, God damn it, I came back for you. I came back because I ache for you every night. I came back because I love the way you smile at me every time I walk my fat arse into a room. I came back because I want to grow old with you. You already know about the part where I wanted to have babies with you. I came back because I can't live without you, and whatever it takes to get you to forgive me, I'll do. That's why I came back. You did live without us for almost a year. Why now? I asked. I missed you and my family. I just want everything back. I got up, held her hand, and walked with her. She followed me like a puppy. Her joy soon turned to horror when she found herself standing out of the house. Bonnie, I'm a very ordinary man, and I like to keep my life plain and simple. Let me remind of what you did in a very ordinary and simple manner. You wanted a baby, just so that you can experience the joy of being pregnant and have all the affection and attention that you never got when you were pregnant the first time. It was your decision to get pregnant from another man. You had a baby and later abandoned that baby and forced me to take care of the baby just because I was tricked to sign the birth certificate. So, you used the law against me. You spied on me and kept an eye on everything I did. In all of your actions, did you notice something? She looked at me puzzled. It was all about what you wanted. You wanted a child, you cheated, you got pregnant, you abandoned the baby. It was all about you. Now you come back and say that you want another chance. Hell no, Bonnie. Not happening. I thought that I would give you a chance for the sake of my daughters, but now I realize that you would be the worst example for a woman. No father would want his daughters to grow up like you. Bonnie was in tears by now, but you love me and the daughters. Don't keep me away from them. By this time, a man had walked up slowly and was looking at Grant. Yes, how can I help you? I am looking for Mrs. Bonnie Henderson. I pointed him towards Bonnie. Mrs. Henderson, you have been served. He handed the envelope and walked away. Any discussion that you want will be with my attorney. I suggest that you find one quickly. I have filed a divorce based on irreconcilable differences, and I will keep the custody of the girls. I will not give you any alimony, and you can have limited visitation right. In case you fight the divorce, I will file a lawsuit against you for paternity fraud, abandonment of a baby at the hospital, and anything that my lawyer can find under the sun. No, please don't do it. I love you. I just wanted you to be happy. By now, my daughters had walked up, and Tara said, "Time for you to leave, Mommy. We have homework to complete." They walked back to their rooms. Goodbye, Bonnie. Bonnie stood there crying, and a few minutes later, she went back to the convent. Bonnie never came for the divorce hearings. In fact, she never hired any lawyer or tried to contest the divorce. The judge simply awarded the divorce as there was no party available to contest. I still live with my daughters and enjoy our life. Bonnie, on the other hand, I am not so sure. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.